Welcome back, Econ students. I'm here today to talk to you about economic growth part two. Just to review, basically we're just going to be talking about factors that could influence economic growth, and I'll go through some of those because those will be attached to an assignment that you're going to see later on today. So with economic growth from yesterday, don't forget how it looks. I didn't do the long-run Phillips curve here, but you have here first production possibilities curve. Production possibilities curve shifting outward is a way of showing that the economy has grown, because in this case, we're able to produce more of each product, good A and B, or we could say produce more toe rings and more jelly beans at the same time. Okay, we're not limited to one or the other in opportunity cost. We're producing more of both. That is represented here on the aggregate supply, aggregate demand model by shifting long-run aggregate supply to the right. So both of these are ways of showing that the economy has grown. So let's talk about reasons why this could happen, or things that could influence whether or not this happens. So you can draw the graphs and jot down this list that I'm going to give right now. Two of the ones bring this back out. We talked about these way back in Unit 1. How do we get from curve number 1 to curve number 2? And the easiest way, new resources. Okay, so new resources are things that can lead to economic growth. If you look at how our economy has been pretty strong for the last decade, some of that has to do with, cheaper oil. We have used fracking, and again, there's cost-benefit analysis there, possible damage to the environment and things like that. But, in general, we found more oil, found new ways to get more oil. That's helped our economy grow. So economic growth, new resources. Technology. Think about any major economic growth in U.S. history, going back to, the railroads in the 1840s and 1850s, or personal computers in the 1980s and 1990s. Massive technological growth has fueled economic growth. So new innovations that allow us to do things cheaper, more efficiently, those sorts of things allow economic growth. And so those were the first two we talked about in Unit 1. So, those are the review concepts. More resources or new resources, more technology. Those are kind of your big factors when it comes to economic growth. But there are other factors as well. So going through the list, productivity matters. Our productivity is how much we're producing per person or per unit of capital and things like that. So having a more productive workforce, or more productive capital goods, those are things that can influence economic growth as well. So productivity, can shift outward, can shift us outward. Think about, it kind of crosses with technology a little bit, how much easier it is to do taxes now than it was back, say, in the 80s and 90s when I was a kid. And I remember going with my dad to an accountant and it taking hours and hours and hours. And now I use TurboTax. I didn't get my taxes done in 45 minutes. Okay, and then I can go do things I'm hopefully more efficient and good at. Okay, so productivity matters. Productivity, the more productive the workforce can lead to economic growth. Education also matters. Investments in human capital. A smarter workforce is a better workforce. A smarter workforce is a more productive and efficient workforce. So investing, and we're not just talking about college education, high school education, trades, things like that. The more education, sometimes economists refer to it as human capital. Investments in human capital can lead to long-run economic growth. Because if you're smarter, you know how to do more things, whether that's installing a garbage disposal or calculating linear equations in calculus, things like that. All that means is investments in human capital can lead to long-run economic growth. Okay. Number 5, and this is a new term, infrastructure. And this term has actually been tossed around quite a bit in the last few years as a potential government stimulus plan. Maybe we'll hear more about it as the government tries to continue to stimulate the economy. But when we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about physical investments in the economy. And we're not talking about the government giving you guys $1,200 or $2,400 and things like that. We're talking about the government building roads and bridges, things that help the economy get moving. So rebuild. Last year, there was a lot of fear that the bridge over the Des Plaines River in Joliet was going to collapse. Well, if Interstate 80 is a huge trucking route, and you guys have all driven on that at some point, it can be kind of scary just the number of semis. But I-80 goes all the way to the east, I think to Philadelphia, goes all the way to the west. I don't remember where its endpoint is. Might actually be something like San Francisco where it ends, and it stops at tons of major cities in between. So it's a huge and important trucking route for our economy. So keeping I-80 in good shape helps the economy keep growing. So whether it's airports, roads, waste management systems, obviously not everybody's going to be a big fan of this, but at North Point having a big intermodal facility down in Elwood, is something like an infrastructure improvement that can speed the flow of goods and services. Obviously, there are costs to it. More trucks, more traffic kind of ruins the small town feel of places like Elwood and Manhattan, which is why so many people are against it. But any sort of infrastructure improvement can lead to long-run economic growth. Low interest rates also play a role. So we're at number 6 now. So new resources, technology, productivity, education, infrastructure, low interest rates. Low interest rates, usually created by expansionary monetary policy, means that the government will have more, or not the government, sorry, that consumers and businesses will have more opportunity to invest. And investment, we talk about investment affecting aggregate demand, but remember, in the long run can affect aggregate supply, and that's one of those things to differentiate. If we're talking about the long run, talking about short run, it's definitely aggregate demand. But in the long run, if we have more investment, more capital goods means more production, and more production means economic growth. Okay? Low business taxes. Okay? Notice I didn't say low household income taxes. Low household income taxes contribute only to aggregate demand and consumer spending. Okay? Typically, low business taxes, if businesses are smart, what they'll do is, it'll affect aggregate demand a little bit because they have to buy the equipment and machinery and build new factories and things like that. But in the long run, this leads to more production. More production equals economic growth. Okay? So low business tax, low corporate taxes, small business taxes leads to more investment. Just like with low interest rates, that will lead to long-run economic growth. Okay? Because it'll produce more capital goods. Now notice, as we're kind of at the end of the list now, I didn't mention government spending, as a way of leading to economic growth. That's because government spending is more of a short-term sort of thing. If depending on what the government spends money on, you'll see the assignment today. If the government is investing in infrastructure projects like building new railroads, airports, and roads and things like that, that's the type of spending that can lead to economic growth. The idea is that right now, if you look at government spending and the stimulus packages, that will lead to an increase in aggregate demand in the short run, but that won't lead to the LRAS shifting to the right or a PPC shifting outward. It will lead to spending in the short run, but it won't lead to long-run economic growth. Or, government spending on social programs, government spending on military, those sorts of things don't lead to economic growth because they only shift aggregate demand. So hopefully that makes sense. So things that only shift aggregate demand in the short run and don't have any impact on long-run aggregate supply or the production possibilities curve, those things don't affect economic growth. So I'm going to share an assignment with you guys. Let me know if you have any questions. It's supposed to help you review both supply-side economics and the economic growth we've been talking about the last couple days. Shoot me emails with questions. Turn in your assignments. Keep up the great work. We'll see you again soon.